So here's the second part, where I'm hoping at the end you understand both that increasing or decreasing by a percentage is equivalent to multiplying by something, but also why this is true, and that you truly understand that it isn't some magic that, oh yeah, I believe this, but that it makes sense. So the first line was we have that $100 dress, and we paid 10% of the cost of that dress in tax, and so we added 10% of 100 to the original $100. Remember, the total cost was $110. This time, though, I'm not going to do it by saying 10% of 10. I'm not going to use order of operations. I'm going to factor. And this might be a little bit easier to see, and it's going to be hard to fit it in there. But instead of saying just 100, think of that as 1 times 100. Then these two terms have a common factor of 100. And it was 100 times 1 in the first term, and it was 100 times 10% in the second term. And so multiplying 100 times 1.10 is really equivalent to adding, mathematically equivalent to adding 10%. And take your calculator out, and well, you don't even need to because it's times 100. Just move the decimal place over. But 1.10 times 100 is really 110. Same thing we got before. In the next line, now the dress cost 120, and the tax is 9% of that. And so I factor out the 120, that common factor from each of those terms, and it's 120 times 1 in the first term, and it's 120 times 9% in the second term. And so now we can write this as 120, and I'm going to use parentheses here instead of that little dot because that's kind of a mess. So 120 times 1.09, and I'm actually got my calculator out. I'm not even going to trust it. I'm going to actually check this. 120 times 1.09, my calculator says 130.8. And that's the $130.80 that we got the last time, because we saw that 9% of 120 was $10.80. Finally, that last example, if I think of this as 1 times 40 minus 15% times 40, and then factor out that 40, it's 40 times 1. It's minus this time, but otherwise identical. And then 40 times 15%. What's a little bit different here is that when I simplify, it's a little bit harder than adding. 1 plus 0.1 is 1.1. 1 plus 0.09 is 1.09. But 1 minus 0.15, decimal arithmetic, make your head spin maybe. But I find this a little bit easier to do if I think of it as 100% minus 15%. Leaves 85%. And now the challenge is to, in this little space with a stylus, write 85. So there it is. But yeah, so if you're taking 15% of the price away, you're left with 85% of the price, and that's going to be the sale price. And we can do this trick even if it's a general formula. If I add R% to some initial amount A, I can think of that as having a 1. I can factor out the A, and it's A times 1 plus R. And the only difference here is I can't add 1 plus R right now because I don't know what R is. This is a general formula. And similarly, if I'm decreasing by R%, it's A times 1 minus R. So I'm going to stop this again. I'm going to make a third video where we actually create an exponential function.